A pleasant day to everyone. For today, we are going to discuss about the social psychology of identity. So first of all, let us define first the word social. When we say social, it is relating or involving acts in which people spend time with each other. And when we say psychology, this is the study of mind and behavior. And the identities is the quality and belief that makes a person different from others. So when we say social psychology of identity, it is a person's sense of who they are based on their membership. So basically, this is all about the identity of oneself. On how can someone be different from one another? We can all be different based on ethnicity, race, sexuality, gender, age, and class. So in this chapter, we will talk about the social construction of identity, language, interactions of identities, social cognition, and symbolic interaction of identities, in which this is organized by the social inequalities, nationalism, and social movements. So race disconnected us, religion separated us, politics divided us, and wealth classified us. So as an introduction, let us talk about the identity first. So when we say identity, it is a keyword of contemporary society at earlier historical moments that is identified that it is not much an issue in that time. But in this current time, the concept of identity carries the full weight of the need for a sense of who one is. So now, let me ask you, who are you? So according to Joseph Love and Harry Ingham in 1955, Johari window model may help one person to understand her or his identity. And this model works using 4 quadrants. So first is anything you know about yourself and are willing to share is part of your open area. And the second one is any aspect that you do not know about yourself but others within the group or community is or have become aware in this is part of the blind area. So there are also aspects that you are aware of but might not want others to know is known as your hidden area. And the last one is the fourth one is the unknown area in which this is the area that is not known by you or anyone.
Social cognition, according to Fiske and Taylor, Agostinius, and Walker, this is a theory of how we store and process information. It is also related to observing others by social interactions, experiences, and outside media influences. This theory also states that when people observe a model performing a behavior and the consequences, that behavior, they remember the sequence of events and use this information to guide subsequent behaviors. In other words, people will learn not just for their failing or succeeding, but for the actions of others.
There are 3 types of schemas: cognitive, self, and group schemas. But first, what is schemas? Schemas is a explanatory design and justification of social relationship, meaning it acts as an identification to know what social relationship you have in the society.
Now, let's define the 3 types, starting with the cognitive schemas. Cognitive schemas is an abstract and organized package of information or cognitive version of identity. In short, it is a storage of memory that stores information that we got in our lives.
Next is self-schemas. Self-schemas include organized knowledge about oneself. Quote and unquote, the cognitive response to the version of identity. who am I like characteristics, preference, goals, and behavioral patterns.
Last is group schemas, or analogous or stereotype. Includes information about social position and stratification of statuses. It plays a major part in the process of identification. Why? Because the society dictate your identity of who or what would you be.
Now here, there are two schemas, which is the self and the group. That allows us to summarize and reduce information to key elements. They also entail loses potentially valuable information and categorizations, and almost always accompanied by system of evaluation of some categories as better or worse.
Now, let's define social identity theory. It focuses on the extent to which individuals identify themselves in terms of group membership. There are two dimensions which individuals define their identities: the social and personal. Social is defined by membership in the various social groups, and personal is having an unusual attribute that is different from the others.
According to Fordham and Ogbu, 1986, one relevant line of research explores the psychological consequences of identification with ethnic in and out groups. Just like, for example, they suggest that academic failure among African American students represents a desire to maintain their racial identity and solidarity with their own culture. And to Arroyo and Ziegler in 1995, high-achieving African American children develops a raceless persona, but at the cost of interpersonal conflict and ambivalence. Adoption of raceless behavior and attitude do have negative psychological consequences for African American students. The direct impression management strategies intended to counter negative evaluations of their group also increase. Nowadays, people only focuses on psychological consequences of identification. They are actively engaging the interconnectedness of cognition and emotion.
According to Levine and Campbell in year 1972, it is a realistic conflict theory. It means that social identity maintains its group identification that causes out-group bias. On the other hand, that out-group threat and hostility lead in-group identification. In a study of Black South Africans' ethnic identification before and after South Africans' transitional election in year 1994, Black African identification was related only to attitude towards African whites, not white in general or English whites. Longitudinal analysis suggests that attitudes affected identifications, more consistent with realistic conflict than social identity theory, a useful caution to overly cognitive approaches to identification.
Cognitive process is the way of thinking of a person that can affect their behavior.
According in this topic, some of what you learn is from communication and interaction to other people.
Your cognitive process can be affected by groups, the internal group and the external group. Internal group is your close friends or family that can affect on how you act, behavior, or attitude and can bring your positive traits. Unlike in external group, these people are the ones that will give you a negative or bad impressions.
When, according to Moscovici's of social representation, when cognitive structures and process structures can be developed through social interaction and communication. This approach have been generally seen as conservative and resistant to change.
Various of studies cited here have been conducted in situations of real groups memberships and real conflicts. Cognitive perception is meaningfully structured by group and group life.
Interactionism, symbolic interaction, is that people attach symbolic meaning to objects, behaviors themselves, and other people, and they develop and transmit these meanings through interaction. It is one of the most important perspectives in the field of sociology. According to Irving Goffman's One must attempt to central the other's behavior during the interaction in order the, to know the information. One is seeking in order to control the interactions of one's own image. Meaning, we derive this concept of attribute to the world around us. It's a social constructions produced by everyday social interactions to communicate to each other. Like for example, when you take a picture with the trees on the background, it symbolizes the nature around you. We act toward and things based on on the meaning we interpret from them.
According to McAdams, 1995, the interactionist literature on identity through various forms of media that people actively produce identity through their talk. According to Hunt et al. 1994, identity talk is organized around two sets of norms. First is concerning respect for situated identities and a commitment to a basic moral precepts. Example, giving respect to others using the words po at opo while talking to others. And second is concerning ways in which people deal with failure to endorse these basic moral precepts through denial of responsibility and other attributional tactics. Next is identity work, that is, according to Hunt and Myler 1997, it is a micro-level performance of social disorder. In short, it defines what is your role in the society.
Many studies focus on population experiencing identity struggles, especially social inequalities. According to Joffman, 1963, O'Brien and Howard, 1998, Anderson at 1994. Stigma is a set of negativity and often unfair beliefs that a society or group of people having something about. There are two distinct types of strategies used by homeless people to avoid stigmatization. First one is in-group techniques used among street peers, including drinking, hanging out, and others. For example, telling jokes and happy moments. And the last one is the out-group technique. Is used to reduce stigmatize by optimizing or minimizing instead the impact of their stigmatized situation.
Identity can be viewed as a more flexible resource in verbal interaction. According to study of Antaki 1996, identity shows through interaction. In his example, those natural English conversation between friends over drinks. Those person who drinks a lot was more sincere to their thoughts and feelings. It concludes to their contradictory identities, but shows the uniqueness and the similarity of the individual. Antaki's study also says that the identity will show up through the setting compared to studying social categories. According to the result of Burkheiten's 1997, it says that people in Netherlands, which is Turks, construct their destiny when they put themselves in the setting for them to socialize or adapt the culture of that place, but it is not fixed. It means that it is not applicable to the others. Language enters on it because through speaking or verbally approach, interactions develop. Herman's 1996 says that through collective voices, speaking will determine where the people belong. For example, social dialects and language of generations.
Identities across the time. The theories of social cognition talks about shifting identities over time based on one model. Code 1996, the identities shift according to historical cultures, where character change based on socialization practices. According to Helson et al., 1995, it's have limited temporal range. Basically, it's a time range that changed the identities of people were example. The identity of movement raised in 1950s have different identities with 1960s. For my own understanding, it is like age gap where trends of change of preferences of people affects the identities of one another that results of different identities over time. We have another approach that called mutability of identities, where identity change according to life transitions, based on Karp et al. 1998. As time passes, as you anticipate new identities, create or discover that deals with interpretative effort to our life. Example of this, as we finish our high school, venture we are planning to prepare ourselves for having college degree and discover new identities of us. There is more chance to discover our identities as we gain dependence that allowed us to discover ourselves, especially the independence from our family. Provocative approach. Identities, we distance ourselves. We have own identities as we want to be, but also we avoid some identities we don't want to be this. It's like avoiding a person we want to keep distance because of having a fear that they can influence us badly. We avoid negative identities. According to Miles et al. 1998, we are trying to change our identity to be able to fit in our peer. Example, we are trying to adjust our identities according to their will, to have a mutual relationship among the people we want to be with.
The another approach is provocative approach. It means that people tend to avoid identity and identities contrast what they are. Freitas finds complex patterns of identity through his aspects, age, gender, sexuality, and ethnicity. While Miles focus on how teenagers socialize in their friends by buying items, but not all the time. For example, when your group of friends have an iPhone, so you buy iPhones to fit in the group.